Out of the original 1984 Autobot cars, there's one that stands out. From his sleek white vehicle mode to his robot mode's rounded, lined mouthplate and flashing vocalizer lights, there's nobody as visually distinctive as Wheeljack. But it just so happens that other characters, particularly bad guys, keep trying to bite his style. When Hasbro and Takara were developing Transformers Armada, they needed a new character for Hotshot's backstory. Takara went rogue and designed his appearance after G1 Sideswipe, naming him Rampage from Sideswipe's Japanese name Lambor. Hasbro called this off-color Sideswipe Wheeljack, reassigning the name for the first time, taking it from our boy and giving it to this bitter Autobot deserter. Of course, Armada couldn't name the guy who looked like Sideswipe because it already had a Sideswipe who was kinda sorta based on G1 Nightbeat. It's not that they didn't have the trademark on Nightbeat, because that's what they called Sideswipe's Minicon partner. Speaking of names that were already in use, when Takara released a new toy explicitly based on the original Wheeljack for Transformers Superlink, that's what they called him. Wheeljack! But Hasbro had already had a Wheeljack, so for Transformers Energon they changed his name to Downshift. Downshift! Transform! At least they did when the dubious dub wasn't mixing his name up with his buddy Cliffjumper. Cliffjumper! A few years later, the official Transformers Collectors Club introduced Shattered Glass, inflicting on the Transformers franchise the cliché sci-fi trope of a wow cool mirror universe. One of the first toys in this theme was Sideswipe, a former evil Autobot turned heroic Decepticon who was a redeco of Armada Wheeljack in the colours of the cancelled yet coveted Universe Drench toy. Itself based on the Autobot Colour Changer Drench, not to be confused with the European G1 Decepticon Stormtrooper Drench, which is a redeco of the Euro G1 Autobot Deluge, not to be confused with the G2 Decepticon Deluge. Something the Collectors Club under Fun Publications, the Fun Pub Club, used to do, especially with Shattered Glass, was design toys that could represent multiple characters, so you could jettison the fiction and still buy the product for your own re-purposes. Shattered Glass toys like Jazz and Ravage and Trax looked just enough like G1 Jazz, Glit and Diaclone Road Rage to placate Mirror Universe antis. One of these was Treadshot, a new character named after Universe Treadshot but visually based on Armada Sideswipe, a toy that made no one happy. Another of these was Slice, one of many toys from the Generation 2 Redux set based on a character not originally from Generation 2. Scrap, we haven't done Slicer yet! Long before Armada Wheeljack was besmirching the name, Slicer was stealing the look. Unlike in the United States, Transformers never died in Europe, with the local counterparts of Hasbro going in radical and wicked directions. Among a zesty selection of new Action Masters in 1991 came Slicer, a recolor of Wheeljack in blue, black and tasty copper. With or without his hot pink dragon Sea Wagon, the Slicer colour scheme became a much requested look on any new toy of Wheeljack. Eventually the modern and mature version of Wheels from the so-called aligned continuity got in on the act with the Dark Energon redeco. That one wasn't a baddie character, but they made up for it, with Prime Wheeljack spawning two different Stunticons on opposing ends of the saturation spectrum, as well as a treacherous shapeshifter makeshift in that cartoon I didn't finish. What's the matter? Too deep for you? So Decepticon Slice materialised at BotCon 2010 as a recolor of Energon Downshift done up to evoke the Action Master. The accompanying fiction depicted Slice as a true blue Decepticon, but because FunPub couldn't remove the Autobot insignia on the Downshift mold's chest, they just painted that sucker purple and called it a day. When the comic story was re-released to a more general audience 4 months later, it gained a new epilogue in which Slicer was duped by the Mirrorverse Wheeljack, whose coincidental resemblance allowed him to pose as Slicer from the future. The sequence notably depicted both characters as Decepticon badged and thus inaccurate to the Slice toy, at least before Wheeljack ripped off his chest decal and revealed his true evil Autobot colours. Slicer made no further appearances in the club's fiction, but Shattered Glass Wheeljack did, essentially giving him prominence over the character that originated his colour scheme. But that ain't the half of it. Further down the rabbit hole, Wheeljack started making increasingly prominent appearances in IDW publishing Shattered Glass continuity. He was more of a secret policeman than a mad scientist in this iteration, but it'd be unfair to call him Wheeljack in name only, since he wasn't Wheeljack in name either. We know from the author's Twitter that Wheeljack renamed himself Slicer, similarly to how Bumblebee became Goldbug, but the comic itself is conspicuously silent on the topic. The contemporaneous Shattered Glass toy line released a figure of this character, recoloured from the Earthrise Wheeljack toy as his comic version had been. But this toy was named Decepticon Slicer, and instead of featuring his evil purple Autobot insignia, he had a Decepticon badge. So was he good or evil? Autobot or Decepticon? Wheeljack or Slicer? The inclusion of a new toy based on his hot pink dragon T-Wagon certainly leaned towards the latter. Perhaps answers can be found, but not before it gets weirder, as we journey into universes beyond. That's a Magic the Gathering joke! The gimmick of the Transformers Magic set was that almost every card was available in two variants, a shattered glass one and a normal glass one. Functionally, each variant was the same, and character selections were restricted by the smaller character pool of the IDW version of the Shattered Glass franchise. So instead of Bumblebee, we get Goldbug to go with Goldbug. Flame War's there, and we get Slicer, hired muscle, with a heroic red Decepticon symbol on his shoulder. Bizarrely, Slicer's normal glass counterpart is a Wheeljack in the colours of Armada Wheeljack, complete with crossed out Autobot symbol. This cements the idea that Shattered Glass Wheeljack has permanently requisitioned Slicer's colours, provided that Magic the Gathering Slicer is supposed to be the same character as the Action Master. Well, perhaps permanently requisitioned is a little strong. There was a minor blip in the Forge to Fight mobile game where Shattered Glass Wheeljack was simply their pre-existing Wheeljack model but with red eyes and a purple auto brand. And we can't blame them, because 3D modelling is time-consuming and expensive. When Transformers Cyberverse needed a distinctive look for a character with less than 20 seconds screen time, they recolored a Wheeljack into a nervous bot. When War for Cybertron Earthrise needed to fill out the ranks of Double Dealer's mercenary crew, they recolored a Wheeljack into Exhaust, a character typically depicted as Wheeljack but with a different head that allows him to smoke cigarettes. When they wanted to bring the Stunticon Breakdown into Earthspark, they gave him an all-new character model because they've got that Nickelodeon money. But the toy was a Wheeljack with a breakdown colour scheme slapped over it. All told, that means we've got Wheeljack, the original, Slicer, the evil Action Master Wheeljack, Wheeljack, Rampage, the evil Sideswipe, Downshift aka Cliffjumper, Superlink Wheeljack, Cliffjumper aka Downshift, Sideswipe, the Nightbeat, Nightbeat, the Minicon, Sideswipe, the heroic Decepticon and former evil Autobot recolor of Wheeljack based on Drench, Drench, who got cancelled, Drench, the G2 redeco of Deluge, Drench, the Euro G1 Decepticon, Deluge, the G2 Decepticon, Deluge, the Euro G1 Autobot, Treadshot based on Sideswipe, Treadshot recolored from Sideswipe, Treadshot not based on Sideswipe, Slice, Downshift to Slicer, evil Autobot Wheeljack, Downshift to Slicer, heroic Dark Energon Wheeljack, Wheeljack as Dead End, Wheeljack as Wild Rider, Makeshift as Wheeljack, evil Autobot Wheeljack aka Slicer that might also be a Slicer that is either a heroic or evil Decepticon, Slicer the Wheeljack that looks like the Wheeljack based on Sideswipe provided he's not the same Slicer, evil Wheeljack that looks just like regular Wheeljack, Exhaust that looks like Wheeljack except most of the time when he doesn't, the Nervous Bot that looked like Wheeljack but not for long, the Breakdown that looks like Wheeljack but only in toy form, and after counting all those Wheeljacks and Sideswipes and Slices, I'm exhausted and having a nervous breakdown. And those are the specifics on Evil Wheeljacks.